Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. Crazy good show for you today.
Ron, isn't that a bit over the top?
Probably British guy, but it doesn't make it any less true.
I see.
Sylvia is back with more creepy stories for us, and we have a strange one about a little black puppy named Mister Mumbles. Add in a war story, and I read a scary one from If Magazine, 1953.
That does sound a bit non-compos mentis.
What? Anyway, here is your 5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by your beloved black coffee.
Ron, why not tea?
Because, British guy, tea is not in this story, and I try to tie these opening bits to relevant parts of the story.
Oh, there are relevant bits in these stories?
One would hope.
It is late afternoon in a small seaboard town, and in an old-fashioned house, old Doc Tucker is resting in his office, waiting for his housekeeper to bring him a cup of his beloved black coffee.
Doc Tucker, if you don't quit using that new operating table for a couch, if you knew how it scares a body to walk in here and see you stretched out there
better
like...
than a couch, Carrie. It's adjustable. As long as I was foolish enough to buy this contraption, I might as well...
I'll get it, Doctor.
Is there a doctor here? I saw the sign. My friend, we were humming. The gun went off.
Good heavens, bring him right in. Doctor!
I'm here, Carrie. Here, young fella. Put him right down here.
How is he, doctor?
A shotgun can make an awful mess of a man. Doesn't seem to be any buckshot in him, except right here where it almost tore a hole through his chest.
But how is he?
Well, I'm afraid there's not much we can do for you, friend, young fella. He's dead. Feel better now? Sort of keeled over. What's this all about?
My name is Johnson. Bertrand Johnson. His name is Billings. We were partners in business.
I see. I'll have to know what happened for my report.
Well, as I said, we were out hunting near here. That is, he was. Golf is my game. And today, he taught me how to aim and fire a shotgun.
This accident, if you could maybe tell me just how it happened.
As I told you, he'd been showing me how to aim the gun, and then some birds flew out of the bushes up ahead of us. He told me to go after them.
You only had this one gun between you?
Yes, Billings owned it.
So you went after the birds?
Every time I got near them, they flew away. I kept following them. I guess I must have lost track of direction. I saw something move in a bush and shot at it. It was Billings.
How could you make a mistake like that?
I don't know. But the bush was very thick, and it was so far away.
Far away?
Well, it must have been at least 50 yards.
Excuse me. Carrie, can you come in here a minute?
Yes, Doctor.
Here, Carrie, I want you to make a phone call. Number is on this slip of paper.
I'll leave my name and address, Doctor, and the name of my partner's wife. If you could telephone her before I attempt to break the news.
It won't be necessary. Your name and address, I mean.
I don't understand.
That was the sheriff I asked Carrie to get on the phone. Until he gets here, I'm holding you for murder.
What makes the doctor suspect that what appears to be a typical hunting accident is deliberate murder? Do you know the clue? We'll learn in a moment. But first...
Why is it that partners always want to kill each other? Just doesn't make any sense. After all, you went into business together to drink beloved black coffee and make money.
Now, you're just reaching for relevance.
So true, British guy. So true. This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by my beloved black coffee.
Now, back to our story.
Doctor, you've no right to accuse me like this.
A little while ago, young fella, you were asking me how bad your friend was hurt, as if you didn't know. Then you told me Billings was behind a bush about 50 yards away when this accident happened. Anybody who knows about shotguns knows that the farther away the target is, the more the pattern of buckshot spreads out. The pattern of buckshot in Billings' body proves that it was no accident, that you couldn't have been more than a few feet from him when you pulled the trigger. No, my friend, your alibi missed its mark.
Buckshot was the thing. Did you get the pattern?
Ha ha ha.
Yep, that was a good one. I knew it straight away when the doctor said, "Oh, look how big the hole isn't."
He never said that.
Well, he should have.
This 5-minute mystery was brought to you by a proper black tea.
Well said, British guy.
What's that you said?
I received this question from Jimmy Townsend, who lives in New York. He writes, "Hey Ron, love the show and I have a question. I currently listen to you on Stitcher Radio and notice that you have around 500 followers there. Is Stitcher your highest follower base? Just curious because I listen to all my podcasts there. Thank you for the podcast, Jimmy." Well, Jimmy, thank you for the question, and I have to say you brought out the geek in me. I know it sounds weird, but you can't work as an engineer for 17 years and not be wowed by statistics. While Stitcher is one of my higher agents, it is not the highest. That belongs to Apple Podcast and iTunes. Stitcher comes in at number 2, though, which has always surprised me. Pandora is the fastest moving service. They've already moved up to the 15th slot, and we've only been there a couple months. There are a total of 91 agents that report statistics on Ron's Amazing Stories, and only one of those confuses me. NS Player is in the 3rd spot, and I can't figure out who they are. Someone told me it has to do with Winamp, but I can't confirm that. If anyone knows who NS Player is, drop me an email. On a related note, Gregory Torres from Parts Unknown sent in this email. "Ron, your show rocks, and even my dog likes it. I've been listening to the podcast on the blog site each week, but I can't seem to be able to download it there. I'm not interested in putting an amp on my phone, so what can I do?" Well, Greg and dog, thank you for the question. The blog site doesn't support downloads. However, all is not lost. You can go to the main website at ronsamazingstories.com and download individual episodes there. On each posting, there is a symbol with an arrow pointing into a box. Click on that and your download troubles are over forever. The blog site was created to host the podcast and my text musings. While the sites are connected, the blog is just not as functional as the actual podcast site. Sorry about that, Chief. I do want to thank you both for some really good questions. Now, I want to remind all of you that we are quickly approaching the 9th annual month of Spooky. This year is shaping up to be something pretty special. It will begin with our 400th episode. This will be a celebration and will feature 4 UFO stories sent in by you guys. It will also be co-hosted by podcast lord and friend Jim Harold. Now, I do have a request. I need lots of scary stories for that month, so if you have something of a ghostly, monsterly, or whatever nature, please send it to me. I really need them. And now, this word from Audible. Today's podcast is being brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle, whatever you have. You can listen to Audible on it. So, what am I listening to right now? 44 Years in Darkness, a true story of madness, tragedy, and shattered love, narrated by Kendall Steele. What makes this audiobook so special isn't just the story, but that it was written by our very own Sylvia Schultz, who will join us later on in the show. In the latter part of the 19th century, Rhoda Deary spent over 40 years in the Adams County poor farm, curled in a fetal position, locked away in a box bed. She had clawed her own eyes out and beaten her front teeth in. Her legs had atrophied to the point where she could no longer stand on her own or even sit in a wheelchair. She had been committed there by her own family and had spent decades locked away from the world. What was her crime? Falling in love. This audiobook examines the social pressures that led to Rhoda's breakdown and her eventual insanity. Then it explores the stories that continue to be told about Rhoda's ghost and her presence at the Peoria State Hospital. You can have Rhoda's story today. Here's what Audible has set up for us. Audible is offering a free audiobook and 30 days for you to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you too can have 44 Years in Darkness today. Thank you, Audible. And now it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
We've talked about this before, but it bears repeating. I love stories. That's why I do this podcast, and I hope it's why you listen. It is my goal to bring you the best of the best, and I try to do that each week. For example, here's one sent in by Master Sergeant Raymond Lieberman. The Master Sergeant didn't say where he was from. Hello, Ron. I thought I would share one of my experiences from Afghanistan. Not everything was bad, and we did have some humorous moments. Here is one of my favorites. We had just come in from patrol and were debriefing when the first blast shook the area. It was way off target and only managed to mangle a car a few blocks away. There was also some small arms fire and an occasional sniper round, all badly aimed or off target. This was actually quite common and always meant that an inexperienced group had been sent out to harass and confuse us. It didn't take us long to figure out where they are, but who? That was another question. My group was assigned, and we were choppered to a point well above the attackers to recon. They had set themselves up on a rock outcropping with no rear guard at all. They never saw us coming, and to be honest, we weren't all that quiet about it. We had them in our sights, and we could have easily stopped the threat right then and there. The problem? They were all children. I'm guessing between the ages of 12 and 16. They had mortars, machine guns, and much to our surprise, a single M110 SASS, which is a U.S.-issued sniper rifle. We radioed back and were given the go to deal with the threat. But how to do that and not get shot and not hurt these kids? We grouped up and came up with a plan. We knew that a direct assault was out. We could get hurt, and the kids would be, well, you get the idea. We could drop smoke on them, but again, with stray fire and they being on a cliff, the odds are someone was going to get hurt. What we decided to do was use the voice of God. With the help of being able to speak fluid Darcy and a bullhorn, we simply yelled, "Hey you kids, this is God. Drop your weapons and prepare to meet your maker." This had the desired effect, and of course, the twin cobras swooping in sealed the deal. They gave up without a fight. The kids were taken away for punishment by the local militia. They would eventually be returned to their families after serving some type of sentence. Where they got the guns, bombs, and sniper weapon was never found out. Master Sergeant Raymond Lieberman, U.S. Army, retired. I love a tale with a happy ending. Thank you, Raymond, for your service and for your story. I had to look up that rifle you spoke of. Quite the weapon. The M110 semi-automatic sniper system is an American-made marksman rifle. It is chambered for 7.62 by 51 millimeter NATO rounds. A heck of a big gun for a bunch of kids to have. Our next story is a real head-scratcher. It was sent to the website as is, with no indication of where it came from or who wrote it. I checked it for plagiarism and didn't find anything, so I read it for you now and let you decide what you think about it. It was titled Mumbles. It was 3 years ago that I met Mumbles, my little black dog who I love so much. My husband was killed in a motorcycle accident. Shortly after he died, I was walking through the woods near my home, trying, somewhat in vain, to cope. I happened upon a small, sickly black puppy cowering under a pile of branches. Upon seeing his sad, small face, I was filled to bursting with pity and longing. This poor dog was as broken and lost as I was. I would have been a monster not to take him in. So I took him home, cleaned him up, and fed him. He was clearly a mutt, having no discernible breed, and pure black from head to toe. So dark, in fact, that I had not noticed that he was missing one of his jet-black eyes. It became even more clear that he needed me as much as I needed him. I could feel it. For 3 years my life has been wonderful. Mumbles has been by my side for all of it. My children and grandchildren just adore him. In fact, anyone who meets him immediately falls in love with him. He plays with the grandkids, dancing around in his weird way, Mumble barking happily and licking their hands, making them giggle. Over the years, my family has never failed to bring Mumbles some sort of toy when they come to visit. He has so many now. The youngest keeps telling me how big he's getting. I realize that maybe I've overfed him some, but after all, it's that small black puppy that rescued me 3 years ago. So, doesn't he deserve it? One summer, my family stopped by for my birthday to chat and drop off presents for Mumbles and myself. I received a camera, and Mumbles got another mound of chewing bones to add to his collection. It's too bad that the camera my son got me didn't work very well. All the pictures I took are miscolored and dark, like there aren't any lights on in my house when there clearly were. Oddly, it was the photos of Mumbles himself that were the strangest. All the pictures showed a black, shadowed blur, roughly dog-like in shape, but with far too many legs. Mumbles' head was stretched on a bizarrely long neck, snaking its way out of a distorted mess into better focus. On his face, behind the tangle of teeth and jet-black eye, there was another eye at the center, sunken and unblinking. There was a blue, eerily human-like eye staring directly past the camera. Initially, the photos scared me, but then I would look at Mumbles' sad, small face, and that would calm me down. It always does. I've since thrown away that camera. It was clearly broken, wasn't it? From the website, written by Unknown. Well, Unknown, I guess it was. Or maybe I hope it was. What a strange and wonderful story. Is Mumbles a monster or just a little lost puppy that doesn't photograph well? I leave that up to you guys to decide. For me, I'm not so sure. If you are the author of this story, please let me know. I have a couple questions for you. Do you have a story that you want to tell on the show? If you do, we want to hear it. It can be about any subject and from any genre. Heck, it doesn't even have to be true. Original fiction or stories from the public domain are quite welcome. To submit them, just head to ronsamazingstories.com and click on the Story Submissions banner. Fill out the form, and soon your story will be heard. Do you have a story but don't want to write it? That's okay too. Just leave your contact information, a brief description of your story, and I'll get back to you. We can write it together. However, if you don't do it, your story remains just that, your story. Why not make it our story? We all love a good story, but what we truly crave is a ghost story. It's time now for Ghost Stories with Sylvia. Sylvia Schultz is a librarian and author by day, but at night, she becomes a ghost hunter. Following a lifetime spent in the pursuit of the weird and the strange, her non-fiction works include Ghost of the Illinois River, Fractured Spirits, 44 Years in Darkness, Hunting Demons, and The Spirits of Christmas. We now cross over the veil and join Sylvia as she tells us more tales from the unknown. Are you there, Sylvia?
I'm here. Come on in, Ron.
Hey, do you realize that it has been over a month this time? Because last time we recorded closer together.
Yes, and the show came out super quickly after the recording, yeah.
So it seems like I haven't been over for months. How you been, Sylvia?
I have been doing absolutely fantastic. I went to Gettysburg and had a wonderful time there, and now I'm home and ready to do some more spooky stories.
Well, you know that Gettysburg is on my bucket list.
Oh, it was amazing. It's got a small town feel to it, and the main street has touristy shops, but a couple of museums too that are really fascinating. And of course, there's out of town, there's the battlefields, and I highly recommend a visit to Gettysburg if you're interested in the paranormal or if you're just interested in history. I dig both, so it was a double treat for me.
Well, let me tell you something that I have had. Every person that has ever been on the show and has talked about Gettysburg has said the same thing. When you get there and you walk out onto the battlefield, the mood changes.
Mm-hmm. It was a bright, sunny, beautiful weather when we were there, except for one rainstorm. But there's an air of melancholy that hangs over the place, especially over the battlefields. And you just can't help but be affected by it. I mean, there's two great armies who never intended to fight in the middle of this tiny little town. They just came together and it just sort of happened, and it kept on happening for 3 whole days. They call it the high water mark of the Confederacy. That is as far north as the Confederate Army ever got into the northern states, and that was where they were turned back.
Well, everybody that I have talked to has had just an overwhelming feeling that they can't ever really describe fully, but they always say that they were almost moved to tears just by walking out there.
Yeah, I definitely had that experience. I wasn't moved to tears, but I did have a feeling of the weight of history and really grasping the importance of this event that affected so many people. And it happened over 150 years ago, but man, the repercussions are still being felt today. The South lost.
Yeah.
And so it really does bring history into the forefront of your consciousness. I mean, it's not something we think about every day, but man, when you're at Gettysburg, history just kind of hits you in the face, but in a good way.
What was there any kind of creepy feeling there? Anything that made you just get any EGBGs, however that is said?
Well, I wouldn't really say it was anything bad, but I was there with a group of 14 people, and we were all paranormal investigators, and we all had our share of experiences. I'll save most of this story for lights out, but on Thursday night, we got to do an investigation in a forest. It is basically these people's backyard, and it's 8 acres that was a Confederate field hospital and a Confederate camp. So that was really interesting, walking around in the dark, just feeling all the spirits of these Confederate soldiers around you. And I must confess, every once in a while I stopped walking and looked up and looked around, but I kept my head down when I was walking because it was dark and I had a flashlight. It was in the middle of the woods. And we were told by our host to watch out, and if we ever smelled cucumbers, to stand very still and holler for him or his wife, because cucumbers are what copperheads smell like.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was keeping a sharp eye out where I was stepping on these trails.
Yikes. Wasn't it Indiana Jones that said, "I hate snakes"?
You haven't heard the half of it.
Okay. Well, I personally can't wait for that episode of Lights Out. So, Sylvia, let's get to it, shall we? What stories do you have for us this time?
Oh, I have some wonderful stories for you guys today. These are stories that raised the hair on the back of my neck. So I hope you guys enjoy them as much as I have enjoyed collecting them for you. So this first story comes to us from Maine. There's a town called Harrington, and in this town there is a building that it's the quintessential haunted house. It just gives off this air of supernatural horror. Nobody really knows what happened in this house, but it affects people in very strange ways. It's been the setting of numerous hauntings and strange occurrences. But what stands out the most, and this is the story I'm going to share with you, is the experience a young boy had of crossing over into a totally different realm of space and time. This happened in the old root cellar of the house. The room was very small. It wasn't much bigger than a large closet. It was also very dark. It didn't have electricity run down to the root cellar. It was lighted only by one narrow window. So if you can imagine a pane of dusty glass letting a little bit of light into this root cellar. So the boy's name was Jason, and Jason's mother kept potatoes in the root cellar. On occasion, he would have to go down there to get some for her for supper. Jason never liked the room because it was dark and creepy and probably had spiders, but he had no reason to really be freaked out about it until one fateful evening. There was nothing unusual to begin with, no warning of danger of any kind. Jason got sent down to the root cellar for potatoes, and he headed down there, where the last of the day's light filtered through the dust and the cobwebs caked on the window. Jason had just finished gathering the potatoes and was preparing to go back upstairs when he abruptly lost all sense of bearing. For some reason, the room had suddenly become completely black, darker than midnight. Standing in the total darkness, Jason tried to fight back the panic rising inside him. He looked towards the window, but in vain. He couldn't find it. It was just nowhere to be seen. Then Jason tried to find the doorway. The small size of the room should have made this an easy task. But when he reached out, there was nothing. No door, no wall, nothing but dark, empty space. Stepping carefully so he wouldn't fall on the uneven floor, Jason continued to reach into total nothingness. At any moment, he expected to find the door or a wall, but no matter how many steps he took, no matter how far he extended his arm in any direction, he continued to grasp only pitch-black emptiness. Eventually, Jason lost all sense of time as well as all sense of space. All he knew was that this tiny room had become boundless in size. Fighting back the horror threatening to overwhelm him, Jason kept walking, his arms outstretched, his fingers continuing to grope for anything solid. But the door and the walls kept eluding him, just as the window had disappeared. Jason has no idea how long he spent down in that root cellar in the complete blackness. Then, finally, when he least expected it, Jason put his hand on the cold handle of the door. He went out of the root cellar as quickly as he could, but before doing so, he glanced over his shoulder, noting that the window had reappeared, its dull square of light dimly illuminating the tiny room. It would be the last glimpse Jason would ever have of the place. Nothing afterwards could force him to go near that root cellar.
Wow. So what was the provenance of that story?
That comes to us from a book called Dark Woods, Chill Waters by Marcus Librizzi.
Wow. That is one creepy story.
Yeah, that's why I collected it. It's a good one.
Do you have another one for us?
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. I was so enthralled by that story that I'm just I don't know what to make it. I've never heard of anything quite like it, except maybe in a Twilight Zone.
Yeah, and just I don't like the dark anyway, and knowing that a room is so small, but you're walking, and you're not touching a wall or a door or anything. It's just black.
Okay, Sylvia, you just said you don't like the dark. Did I hear that?
I don't.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You're in the wrong profession.
I know. If there's somebody with me, I'm fearless. And being outside at night, where there aren't any walls closing in, that's completely fine. But I just really don't like being in a dark room by myself.
Okay, so how did you write the book, 44 Years in Darkness, then?
I'm combating it one day at a time, Ron, one day at a time.
Okay, Sylvia, do you have a second story for us?
I sure do. Okay, in 1961, a young Parisian named Henry discovered a hidden entrance to the Paris catacombs, and along with 6 of his friends, he went deep underground to explore the unknown. After walking through the dust of centuries for a couple of hours, the group's lamps and flashlights suddenly failed. Now imagine that. You're in the Paris catacombs, surrounded by the bones and skulls of centuries, and your flashlight goes out. They were plunged into utter darkness, knowing that there was nothing worse. For when the light go out, it was said that the tunnels change and move. The group huddled together and prayed hard. Suddenly, Henry's flashlight flickered back on, and they breathed a collective sigh of relief. As Henry knew the tunnels better than anyone, the group held hands with Henry leading the way. All the way back to the surface, Henry could feel his friend Louis gripping his hand hard. As he approached the entrance, Henry turned to his friends with a whoop of triumph. His whoop turned to a scream of terror when he saw they were not there. Only a black shadow which left his hand and drifted back down the tunnel. Henry never saw his friends again.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. What a creepy story. I'm sensing a theme here, Sylvia. Are you trying to make us all afraid of the dark?
Well, if I'm suffering, y'all have to suffer too.
Okay, I hate to ask, but do you have another one?
Oh, yes, I do. Now, this next story is called Ship of Death. And this doesn't have to happen in the dark. This can happen in broad daylight. A phantom ship that rises out of a strange mist on the Platte River is a harbinger of death. The old sailing vessel emerges from a gigantic rolling ball of fog, with its sails and masts covered with frost. A ghostly crew is seen huddled around a corpse lying on a canvas sheet on deck. Everyone is covered in frost. Slowly, the crew steps back to reveal the identity of the corpse. It is always a person known by the witness, someone who will die that same day. That's the lore of this ghost story. In 1862, trapper Leon Weber saw the form of his fiancée on the ship. In 1887, cattleman Gene Wilson saw the body of his wife laid out on the canvas. In 1903, Victor Haiba was chopping down a tree on his riverfront property when he saw the ship. On deck, he saw the body of a close friend. In all cases, the encounters took place in late autumn, and the person seen on the deck of the phantom ship died that same day.
Wow.
Don't go by the Platte River. Don't go looking for ghost ships there.
Which Platte River is this?
It's somewhere out west.
Okay, so we've had 2 stories in the dark, and now we've got ghosts trying to kill us. I hope the last one is the creepiest of the bunch.
The last one is the creepiest of the bunch.
No.
Ron, when I read this story, I knew I had to share it with the audience because this gave me the creeps. That's really hard to do.
Oh, my word. What are we in for?
You know how hard it is to unsettle me, and this freaked me out. All right, this story is titled Ghostly Glove in the Dust Cart. Now, I should explain at the beginning that this story came from a Phantoms and Monsters blog respondent from England. So when he says dust cart, he means garbage truck. It's got a bit of an English flair to it, but I'll translate from the Queen's English as we go along. So John writes this story. It was lunch break at school, and I always went home for lunch. My mother would always meet me at the school gates to walk me home. There were other mothers who had gone to meet their children as well, and my mother had started to talk to one of them. I got tired of waiting for my mother to finish her conversation, so I started to walk home. As I went around the corner, there was a white dust cart or garbage truck parked at the side of the road. The dust cart was filled with filth and rust, but one thing caught my eyes as I looked in the back of the dust cart. There was a blue glove hanging out of the dust cart crusher. As I looked at the glove, I heard a strange slurping sound and watched as the glove slowly filled up like it was being inflated with air. Once fully inflated, it looked like someone's hand was in the glove. I looked on with amazement as there was no way that someone could be in that crusher. The glove then started to wave and slowly moved its fingers one by one. Then, to my surprise, a voice came from the garbage truck, and it said, "All right, mate." The voice sounded like a normal English man's voice. I quickly turned around to see if my mother was coming up the road so I could tell her what was going on. She was still busy talking, so I turned back around and watched as the glove flopped down to how it had been hanging before it had moved and inflated. I was really gobsmacked by what had just happened. I stood there for a minute staring at the limp hanging glove before I walked around to the front of the dust cart to see if there was anyone in the cab mucking around. I could clearly see that there was no one in the cab of the dust cart. I walked around to the back again. There was no sign of movement from the glove. I stood there for about 10 minutes waiting for my mother, and when she finally walked over to me, I told her what had happened and how the glove had come to life in the back of the dust cart. She said, "John, you must have imagined it. How could that glove possibly move?" I said, "I know what I saw, and it was real. There wasn't even a man's voice that came from the dust cart." She just looked at me bemused. We walked along the road to my grandparents' house, where we would always have lunch during school dinner break. I sat down on the sofa to watch television with my grandparents, and the BBC 1 o'clock news came on. I remember seeing Margaret Thatcher talking on the international news before the local South Devon news came on. At the end of the local news, there was a story of a man who had accidentally fallen into the back of a dust cart. and had been crushed to death by the powerful compacting mechanism before his colleagues had realized what had happened and shut off the machine. The news story went on to say that the dust cart had not been taken out of service, but instead had just been cleaned out overnight and put back into service the next day. This incident took place at Newton Abbot, Devon, England, a long time ago.
Oh, okay. Creepy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, creepy word.
What a way to go. Yuck.
Yeah, ew. I don't know if the poor fellow just leaned over too far and fell in, squished in the garbage truck.
I've heard of people being trapped in them, but I have never heard of anyone being crushed. That is unfortunate.
Goodness, that compactor just starts going. You wouldn't be able to get it to escape. You'd have nowhere to go. Just horrifying.
Yeah, it's the stuff that horror is made of, I guess.
Yeah. Well, like Sean Connery says in The Untouchables, everybody's got to die of something.
Yeah, let's not. That's a way that I would rather not have it happen.
Yeah, no.
Well, Sylvia, what's going on with the blog, and tell us about Lights Out.
Oh, well, got some book news to share. So if people are interested, they can go to sylviaschultz.wordpress.com and read what I have to say there. And Today I Learned continues every Monday. And I have a real treat for everyone with the next Lights Out. I got to go inside one of the cottages at the Peoria State Hospital. This is a building that's been in private hands for a very long time, and the Peoria State Hospital Museum folks have just acquired it, and it is going to be the new permanent home of the museum. And I sneak peek inside it, and I will take you guys along with me in the next Lights Out, and there's even a ghost story attached to it already.
So when is the next Lights Out?
Oh, I'm hoping for early September for that one.
That sounds great. I can't wait for it. Well, Sylvia, I can see by the clock on the wall that I got to go catch my train back to home.
All right, hurry.
It's only like 4,000 miles. No, maybe 2,000. Time you're going to have to come out and visit me in Washington.
I would love to, as long as you can promise it's not going to rain.
I cannot do that. Well, Sylvia, it's always been a pleasure, and I enjoyed today's stories, even though every one of them creeped me out this time.
Well then, Ron, I did my job properly, didn't I?
Thank you, Sylvia, and that's it for this time.
I'll see you next time.
I always have a great time talking with Sylvia, and I learn all kinds of new stuff. If you want to visit her on her own turf, head to sylviaschultz.wordpress.com. There you'll find her blog and access to the podcast Lights Out. I'll have those links for you in the show notes. Thank you, Sylvia. And now, this message from Gladys Goodies.
I'm Gladdy, the dachshund, the face of Gladdy's Goodies. Are you worried about your pet's health? My parents were too, especially since I developed pancreatitis. They couldn't find any treats I could eat, so they made some. Our natural treats are healthy for all dogs, with and without health issues. We have lots of delicious flavors like chicken, turkey, salmon, sweet potato, beef, and more. With our homemade treats, you won't worry about the contents because they have no chemicals, fillers, or bad ingredients. Go to GladysGoodies.com now to get your fur friend a bag and pick them up some swag while you're there. You'll be glad you did. Remember, we have the treats and swag to make their tails wag. Again, that's GladysGoodies.com. Again, that's GladysGoodies.com.
Don't forget to use our very own promo code RONS to get a 20% discount on all your purchases. That is RONS. Thank you, Gladdy.
As read by. Amazing stories read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have a story that I found in my new favorite place, the 1950 pulp magazines. This story appeared in If magazine, September of 1952. Before I read this story, you should probably prepare yourself for a jolt and a chill in capsule form. O. Henry would have been proud of it, and it could well become a minor classic. It is titled The Last Supper and was written by T.D. Hams. Hampered as she was by the child in her arms, the woman was running less fleetly now. A wave of triumph swept over Galdrin, drowning out the uneasy feeling of guilt at disobeying orders. The instructions were mandatory and concise. No capture must be attempted individually. In the event of sighting any form of human life, the ship must be notified immediately. All small craft must be back at the landing space no later than 1 hour before takeoff. Anyone not so responding will be presumed lost. Galdrin thought uneasy of the great seas of snow and ice that was sweeping towards them. These storms had destroyed almost all life on Earth since it had reversed on its axis over a millennia ago. Now, summer and winter alike brought paralyzing gales and blizzards. It was the tracks in the sleety snow which had led him to her discovery. His trained anthropologist mind speculated over the little that they had gained from the younger of the two men found a week before, nearly frozen and half-starved. The older man had succumbed almost at once. The other, in the most primitive sign language, had indicated of several humans living in the cave to the west, and that only he and the other had survived to flee some mysterious terror. Galdrin felt a throb of pity for the woman and her child, left behind by the men, no doubt as a hindrance. But what a stroke of fortune that there should be one male and female of the race left to carry on the seed of Terra to another planet. And what a triumph if he, Galdrin, should be the one to return at the 11th hour with the prize. No need of calling for help. This was no armed war party, but one of the most defenseless beings in the universe. A mother burdened with a child. Galdrin put on another burst of speed. His previous shouts had served only to spur the woman to greater efforts. Surely there must be some magic words that had survived even the centuries of illiteracy. Something equivalent to the bread and salt of all illiterate people. Cupping his hands to his mouth, he shouted, "Food! Food!" Ahead of him, the woman turned her head, leaped lightly in mid-stride, and went on, slowing a bit, but still running doggedly. Galdrin's pulse leaped. He yelled again, "Food!" The instant his foot touched the yielding surface of the trap, he knew that he had met defeat. As his body crashed down on the fire-sharpened stakes, he knew too the terror from which the last men of the human race had fled. Above him, the woman looked down, her teeth gleaming wolfishly. She pointed into the pit and spoke gleefully to the child. "Food," said the last woman on Earth. End of The Last Supper. This story came from If magazine. Their tagline was Worlds of Science Fiction. The magazine was moderately successful, and it achieved its greatest success under editor Frederick Poole. This story will probably never be a classic, but I thought it was pretty good. I actually rewrote parts of it to make it more 21st century friendly, and you can do that with public domain material. Not much was available about the author Thelma D. Ham. other than she was born in 1905 and passed away in 1994. She wrote several books and short stories, all of which were science fiction, and all under the name T.D. Hams. Yep, it's time for another round of those old-time radio commercials that we all love. Well, I do at least. Wheaties made advertising history as the first product to feature singing commercial on network radio. Its first airing took place Christmas Eve, 1926. The soon-to-be-famous Have You Tried Wheaties jingle was sung by 4 male singers known as the Wheaties Quartet. Here is that very old and very first commercial from 1926. That is over 93 years ago.
Have you tried Wheaties? They're whole wheat with all of the bran. Won't you try Wheaties? For wheat is the best food of man. They're crispy and crunchy the whole year through. The kiddies never tire of them, and neither will you. So just try Wheaties, the best breakfast food in the land.
This next one's from a few years later, but still an important part of our mornings. Nescafé is a brand of coffee made by Nestle and was first introduced in Switzerland in 1938. Here is one of their early commercials that aired exclusively in the United States.
2 beans times 2 beans is 4 beans. Nescafe uses lots more beans. 10 beans times 4 beans and add 3 more beans make 43 rich coffee beans. Yes, you get 43 beans in every cup of Nescafe real coffee beans. That's all there is in Nescafe. 43 beans in every cup make Nescafe the all coffee instant coffee with the let's have another cup taste.
Extra beans means extra flavor. Today's Nescafe goes all the way for flavor with 43 choice beans in every cup.
Our last one comes from cream of wheat. Yep, another breakfast favorite. Did you know that it was first manufactured in the United States in 1893 by the wheat millers in Grand Forks, North Dakota? The product made its debut at the 1893 World Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Illinois. It is still with us today and has been a breakfast staple now for over 125 years. That's quite a run.
We have it every day. We sing this song, it will make us strong, and it makes us shout, hooray! It's good for growing babies and grown-ups too to eat. For all the family's breakfast, you can see cream of wheat.
Not great quality on that one, but you get the idea. That's all I have for this edition of OTR Commercials. I hope that you enjoyed it. It is official. We're done for this time. On the show next week, Jason and I will board the train for another trip on the Horror Express. I want to thank Jimmy Townsend, Gregory Torres, Master Sergeant Raymond Lieberman, Mister Mumbles, and of course, Sylvia Schultz. You all were awesome. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. If you want to help out with the show, the best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it. And please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. This really helps us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.